Hi Copic fans, Michelle Houghton here. Thanks for joining me today at Copic in the Craft Room. I am going to be coloring up a stamp by Concord and Ninth today. This is a fun stamp set. This is a company I have not used before, their stamps, but beautiful images, and a lot of them are larger. This particular set is some geodes or crystal geodes. We have one that's a heart shape, and then I have this other one that's kind of that big, kind of natural geode egg shape. So I'm going to be coloring up that egg one, but I wanted to look for some actual photo kind of color references. So I picked out two. I thought the heart one would be fun to do, more kind of a pink crystal, and then I've got this kind of blue purpley crystal. And so I've got some colors picked out that I tested on separate sheets of paper, and there's some of my pinks that I'm going to use later, kind of red violets. And then the outer shell has kind of more earthy tones to them. So I'm going to set that heart one aside, and you have to check back next week because that one is what I'm coloring up next week, and I'm going to be able to do that one in real time because it's so short and quick. So I'm going to start with this one. I'm using that photo reference I've tucked off to the side, and I'm starting with BV20 at the inner portion of the egg. And then I'm going to add that kind of throughout that inner portion. And then I'm going to add the V20. So both two zeros, but one's that BV, and now I've got that V, so a blue violet and then a violet to those outer rings, because it's a little bit, has more pink to it, a more violet tone versus blue violet. You're also going to notice that I'm keeping this really loose. It's not real heavy thick, and so it's not solid. It's very, there's places that are not smooth. BV23 is coming in next, and I'm using kind of a loose scribble. It's not like the texture that I use for fur and foliage. I'm really just kind of doing loose jagged lines, I guess is the best way to say that. I am using that brush nib, and I'm pushing down a little bit on that so it's a thicker line. You're going to notice also that for that no line coloring effect, I'm going right up against those gray lines. I've stamped in that gray to get that look, to be able to hide those lines. So I've shifted my color. I'm onto a B91. I felt like looking at the photo, the center, not only was it kind of this darker blue violet, but it actually had quite a bit of blue in it. But it's a very desaturated blue, meaning one that has a lot of gray in it. So I leaned into my B9s. So I started with that B91, and now I'm going darker with a B95. Again, adding those darker tones right up against those stamped lines to try to make those disappear a little bit. So I'm going right over the top of them. And at this point on those inner rings, we've kind of lost some of those. The last step kind of for the center, or the last color I'm adding in the center sections, is this BV25. And notice as I've gotten into those darker tones, I'm using less and less. So I'm getting more up onto the point of that brush nib. So the lines are a little bit narrower, but I'm still using that scribble or loose scribble. And this color does not go all the way around. Coming back and softening some of those edges with B95, and then you're going to see me work back through a couple of the colors. BV20. And this I'm brushing over the areas quite a bit. All I'm trying to do is soften some of those colors together. I'm not trying to smooth that out, because if you saw that photo, and I'll move it over again toward the end, But when you look at that photo, it's rough. It's all these crystals inside that rock. So I want to keep it very bumpy and chunky looking, I guess. Colorless blender, I'm brightening up some of those lighter areas. The other thing that that's going to do with that BV20, if you've used that before, is it kind of separates out the blue and the violet and gives me more blue tones in there. V22 is next, and I'm starting to work out into those kind of outer 3 rings. So I've got a violet again. So we've taken some of the blue out on these outer rings, and if you can kind of barely see my phone kind of sitting off to the side there, and I keep hitting it so it stays open. I need to just lock it open next time. But this is my photo reference, and I'm keeping it close because you can see that edge of the geode it's getting more into those violet tones versus the blue tones. So a V15 is next, and this is going to bring that really bright kind of pinkish purple or that brighter violet color into those little pieces. Again, I've gotten darker because I went from a V22 to a V15. That last number is telling me it's darker, and I'm going to use it less. So I'm kind of cautiously going in more up on the tip of that brush nib and still using kind of a real loose scribble. Random is a good word for it. I'm not trying to hit specific spots. And also at the same time of all of that is I'm trying to make some of those gray lines disappear. BV23 is next, darkening up some of those edges and getting those tones right in the, again, this is as much about getting those gray lines to disappear and adding in some of those darker tones. Going back and softening some of those areas, and decided that was not the marker I needed to do that with. Going back now with that V20, and this is where I'm circling and brushing real lightly over the entire area. And I'm just lightening that up, softening, kind of smooshing. That's my favorite word. It's kind of smooshing those colors together. I grab my darkest BV, my BV25. It's the darkest I have over at my table today. And there's this one seam that runs all the way around that geode. And I'm decided instead of leaving this one light that I'm going to take it dark. So that BV25 is going to create that ring. And you can see again, this is my reference off to my side. And I feel like I've actually captured something pretty close. So I'm pretty excited. So now I'm switching gears. I've got this shell, that outer rock that I want to imitate. And so I've switched over to an E7-1. And I did color this initially in with that lightest V, the V20, but now I decided that shell can be a little bit thicker, and I'm going to do that full outer ring, kind of these earthy tones. It's not going to hurt to have that V underneath. It actually will add in, and I will warm it up here in a second with my last color. E70 is coming in. I'm going right up against that darker E71 and pulling in toward the center, leaving some light areas right down the center of that outer edge. And then I'm taking E50 and really scrubbing into the center and kind of running all the way around that outer ring. It's going to warm it up. It's going to really change the tone of that outer ring so that it looks like a separate piece, that it looks more like the shell of the geode versus the inner crystals. So excited about how this is turning out. You have to tune in next week now because I'm going to do a second one, that little heart one, and I will show you how both of them get transitioned onto cards. I think I might need to figure out a way, at least on one of them, to also add some of that shine and sparkle that you would find in a geode. Thank you so much for joining me here today. If you have a chance, stop by scrapweaver.com and check out all the latest. We have live classes coming up in the fall for Copic College, so make sure to check it out. Thanks for joining me, and have a happy, colorful day.